Welcome to the Commodore 64 compilation comparison video, and in this video I'm going to be reviewing a compilation that was chosen by you guys, my subscribers. I put it out to a vote. I gave you an option of 3 different Ocean released compilations, and the one that won by a country mile, 68% of the votes, was this. They Sold a Million. Originally released in 1985, it's a compilation of 4 games that cost £9.95 when it was originally released, and it's published by Ocean, as I said, although the branding is not exactly Ocean. We'll take a look at that in a minute. So, and on that note, let's get on with it. So as I just mentioned, it's an Ocean released compilation, but as you can see, the 4 games don't all come from Ocean. They're from Ocean, Software Projects, Ultimate Play of the Game and US Gold. The 4 games are Daley, Thompson's Decathlon, Staff of Karnath, Set Willy and Beachhead. Beachhead, by the way, I reviewed not that long ago as part of US Gold's Gold collection, so I will be reusing the footage and my commentary review type stuff from that. I'm not going to be re-recording it. As I said, the packaging, it's shown as being released by the Hit Squad. This predates the Hit Squad budget range from Ocean by a good number of years, probably 4 or 5 at least. So yeah, it doesn't actually be branded as an Ocean compilation. It's branded as Hit Squad, but it was published by Ocean. So there's the front cover. As I say, it's just the covers of the 4 games that are on the compilation with this nice gold They Sold a Million logo. I don't know if it's actually true that they sold a million. Is it 1 million copies each or 1 million copies between them? I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, moving on to the spine, which is pretty poor. It doesn't even say the name of the compilation on it. It's got Commodore 64 in massive lettering, the best group of hits in inverted commas in game history, and again it's got that Hit Squad logo. And then on the back there it does say they sold 1 million there, and it also says the same thing it says there, I guess, the best group of hits, but in French for some reason. And the back, you can see, it's got no screenshots or anything like that. It's just a plain black cover on the back there. So the compilation consists of 2 cassettes with a game on each side, which is pretty reasonable. A lot of compilations would have more than 1 game on each side and maybe limit it down to 1 cassette. So we've got Beachhead and Daley Thompson's Decathlon on tape 1, and the other 2 games, Staff of Karnath and Set Willy, on the other one. Pretty bland sort of white sticker there. Nothing very much to say about it. It's just got the name of the compilation and the name of the games on. Nothing on the opposite side. I've got no instructions for this one, but I have seen them and they're pretty comprehensive, so I will be taking that into account when I review the packaging or give it a score. Inside, bit of a shame though, there's no descriptions of the games. It's just a repeat. It almost looks like an advert of itself, this compilation here. It says they sold 1 million, then it's got the cover of that side again on the sort of inlay. There's no screenshots, there's no descriptions of the 4 games, so that's a little bit disappointing. It does seem like a bit of a waste of a colour page of the inlay. And on the inside, nothing, as I say. The instructions were printed on a separate little booklet or leaflet, and they are comprehensive. I've seen pictures of them, so as I said, I will take that into account. So that's it for the packaging. Let's now take a look at an advert for it. This advert for the compilation comes from the November 1985 issue of Zap 64, but I'm pretty sure this would have featured in most of the computer magazines at the time because it was a cross-platform release. It features the logos of the 4 contributing publishers across the top, along with a massive They Sold a Million logo, and then below that is a depiction of the packaging, although this one seems to be rendered in shimmering gold, which definitely wasn't the case for the real thing. The one notable thing to pick out from the cover is that the Spectrum and Amstrad versions of this compilation featured Sabre Wolf, and it was only the Commodore 64 that got the substitute game from Ultimate, Staff of Karnath. On the right hand side of the cover art it says the best group of hits in inverted commas in game history. It's almost as if the producers of this advert didn't quite believe they were all hits themselves, and as for my thoughts on whether they're all hits, well, you'll find that out soon enough. Below that it also mentions that the release date for the compilation was the 1st of November 1985, and in the bottom left you can see confirmation that it was released for the Spectrum, Amstrad and Commodore 64 on special double cassette at a price of $9.95 or $12.95 for a disc version. That actually seems like a decent price for 4 very well known titles at this point in time, and with this eye-catching advert I'm sure it attracted plenty of attention. Although if 1 million of these games had already sold, did anyone really need the compilation? The answer to that is definitely yes, because there are plenty of copies of it available for sale on eBay. Anyway, enough of looking at the advert, let's move on and look at the first of the 4 games in the compilation, and that's Daley Thompson's Decathlon, originally released by Ocean in 1984. The Decathlon is the most gruelling event in the history of the Olympiad, and in this game all 10 events are reproduced, with each building up the points necessary to gain the winner's medal. The first day's events consist of the 100 metres, long jump, javelin, high jump and 400 metres, while the second day features the 110 metre hurdles, discus, pole vault, high jump and finally the energy sapping 1500 metres. The running events, long jump and javelin, require continuous left to right joystick movement to increase speed. For the hurdles you must also press the fire button to jump. For the long jump and 3 throwing events, you must try to achieve a launch at the optimal angle and as close to the takeoff line as possible. For the high jump, on takeoff you must get as close to 90 degrees as you can and then press the fire button to manoeuvre over the bar, and in the pole vault you must press the fire button to position the pole and release it to let go at the correct time. The on-screen score display shows the number of attempts, points scored, world records and the qualifying times or distance. You begin with 3 lives, which are lost through failing to qualify. Believe it or not, this was the first time I'd ever played this game. Having now done so, the one thing I can say is that you should never play it on a warm day, because while you might think just waggling a joystick isn't that strenuous, when you've got through all 10 of the events here you'll be a sweaty mess. The game is clearly a rip-off of Konami's arcade classic Track and Field, albeit with more events. Most events play almost identically to the coin-op, and the overall look of the game is very similar too. Graphically, it copies Track and Field quite closely, with a similar screen layout, the same scrolling direction, and even touches like the man measuring your distance on the long jump. The player sprites are a lot more compact though, and there are odd colour choices in places, like blue for the sandpit on the long jump, which makes it look more like a swimming pool. One thing I did like was the advertising billboards along the side of the track, with some famous UK store names from yesteryear included. The gameplay is basically identical to the Konami sports games, and also Activision's Decathlon for the Atari 2600. For the 100, 400 and 1500 metre events, it's just a case of waggling the joystick at different speeds depending on the distance. It can be excruciating on the longer 2 tracks, especially as you have no idea how much distance is left to go. Some markers would have been nice. The runners also seem to slow down as they reach the finish line, which is a little odd. The long jump is exactly the same as Track and Field, as you waggle as fast as you can before trying to jump at an angle close to 45 degrees to get the best distance. It seems quite hard to time your jump though, and I found myself getting a foul many times. The shot put is something the Konami games didn't have, and in this you need to be as close to the line as possible and just tap the fire button quickly to get an angle of about 50 to 60 degrees. It's different to holding the button down for the long jump and javelin, and there's no need to waggle the stick to gain speed on this stage. The javelin is again just like in Track and Field, with the throw angle needing to be 45 to 50 degrees, and you have to gain as much speed as possible before you throw, as without the speed you won't get the distance you need. This is actually one of the more tricky events to get a qualifying distance in. The 110 metre hurdles is hard work, as it comes immediately after the energy sapping 400 metres, and it's very hard to time the jumps. I never actually managed to get a qualifying time on this one. The discus is almost identical to the shot put, but the release angle needs to be lower. Around 40 degrees seemed to be the sweet spot there. The pole vault was initially difficult, but once you realise that the pole needs to be almost through the post before you press the fire button, it does get easier. There's no option to change the starting height here, so once you've mastered it, it does get a little boring going through all the easy lower ones before you get close to the world record level. As in Track and Field, the high jump is quite tough to complete, though it is a little easier than that version once you work out where to start your jump. Again, there's no option to change the starting height on this one. Each event is introduced with a tune playing, and it's not skippable, so that gets a bit tedious. There are also unnecessary delays after events too, such as the laborious measuring of the long jump. The tunes that are played are okay, but the in-game sound effects are very limited. There are no running noises in most events, for example. One annoying factor is that each event automatically starts after the last one. It would have been better if you got a results screen that you could press fire to move on from when you were ready, rather than just being thrown into the next one. In particular, the ability to take a break after the long running events would have been very welcome. Another gripe is that there's no option to practice events, so you only have at best a few chances to get it right during the game, and are forced to play through those gruelling runs just to reach the more complex field events. The game also doesn't seem to retain any world records you set, as they all seem to go back to the defaults when you start a new game. Overall, this is a reasonable arcade multi-sports game, and a decent enough alternative to the others I've mentioned, but it is hard work doing all that waggling, and it's tough to get some of the jumping and throwing events right. It needed just a little more polish on the presentation side to make it more fun. Up next is the Staff of Karnath, originally released by Ultimate Play the Game in 1984. You play the role of Sir Arthur Pendragon, ace adventurer and researcher into ancient legends and sorcery, and your task is to find and destroy the legendary and dangerous Staff of Karnath. The object of the game is to find 16 pieces of a key which when connected form the shape of a pentacle. Each of these pieces has been hidden throughout Karnath's castle, and each is protected by creatures conjured up by Karnath just before his death. You have in your possession a magical ring from which you can use numerous spells. These can be used against the creatures and will have different effects, but only one spell will have any effect on the particular creature you've encountered. As each piece of the pentacle is found, you must take that piece and position it in the ancient stone obelisk located somewhere in the lower levels of the castle, using the Barakata spell. Once all the pieces have been found and the pentacle is formed, you'll be able to establish the whereabouts of the Staff of Karnath itself, which when located can be destroyed. If Arthur is hit by any of the creatures within the castle, he'll lose energy, or in some cases time. Your energy reading starts at 100% and the time at 6 PM. You have until midnight to recover and destroy the staff. This was the first game in the Arthur Pendragon series, and it set the graphical tone for the games that would follow, with its chunky sprites that are distinctively Commodore 64. The animation is really nice though, the environment is detailed and there's a huge variety of enemies. Some of those are generated by the use of expanded sprites, which are extra chunky but still impressive when you first see them. The environment has a mild isometric 3D perspective, which I'd usually moan about, but it works here to help give depth to the rooms, and it's not too problematic to navigate around once you get used to the controls. The sound is limited to spot effects, and a lot of them are rather squeaky, repetitive and annoying. It's initially hard to work out what to do in the game, and you'll die a lot with loads of respawning enemies and only one life. Once you discover where to deposit the pieces of the key, which also restore your health, it does open the game up more, but it is in essence a very repetitive fetch quest. There are lots of spells to switch between and you need to work out which ones kill which enemies, but they all look the same when you fire them, so it's hard to remember them by name alone. There also seem to be other items that probably relate to puzzles in the game, but I didn't play long enough to investigate them. This is very much a trial and error game with lots of rooms to explore, and there's probably an optimal route to making your way through it. Eventually though, you'll come unstuck and have to restart from the beginning, and having to repeatedly drop off the key parts gets tiresome. It's a polished and well designed game, but perhaps a little too difficult to get into, and very frustrating when you die after finally making good progress. It's that time again where I say thank you to all my channel members, whose names you can see here in my Supporters Hall of Fame. If you're enjoying this video and would like to join these fine folks and support my efforts, why not become a member yourself? For a monthly fee starting from just 99p, you can get access to the special membership perks shown on screen, and more besides. If you're interested, then please click on the join button below this video for more information. If you're not able to commit to a monthly contribution but would still like to support my channel, then you could also give a super thanks. This one-off donation gives you a highlighted comment on whichever video you choose to click the button on, and anyone doing this will also get a shout out from me on a subsequent video. The super thanks button can be found below every video I produce. You can also help raise the profile of this channel by liking this video and leaving a comment, which helps improve my ranking in the mysterious YouTube algorithm. Any support you can give, financial or otherwise, is greatly appreciated. The third game on the compilation is Set Willy, originally released by Software Projects in 1984. Miner Willy, intrepid explorer and nouveau riche socialite, has been reaping the benefits of his fortunate discovery in Surbiton. He has a yacht, a cliff-top mansion and hundreds of newfound friends who really know how to enjoy themselves at a party. His housekeeper Maria, however, takes a very dim view of all his revelry, and finally after a particularly boisterous thrash she puts her foot down. All Willy can think about is crashing out in his four-poster bed, but Maria won't let him into his room until all the discarded glasses and bottles have been cleared away. You must help Willy out of his dilemma, but he hasn't explored his mansion properly yet, and there are some very strange things going on in the further recesses of the house. This is going to be a pretty short review because I'm really not a fan of this game and don't have much positive to say about it. It has the same basic single colour graphics ported direct from the original Spectrum version, but without the same vibrancy of colours of course. I will at least acknowledge that there are a number of quirky, well animated enemy characters though. The sound effects are very simple, but the music is okay. It's not sophisticated in any way, but it's marginally better than most other versions of the game by virtue of being played through the SID chip. The gameplay is just horrible, and I'll never understand why people love this or Manic Miner so much. The screen layouts are infuriating, needing to master pixel perfect jumping to get past many hazards. The problem there is that Willy's jump is awful, being a long arc that can't be interrupted or controlled mid-air, so once you've jumped you better hope you got it right. I navigated half a dozen screens and then couldn't get past the banyan tree one. I spent dozens of lives trying to get past a series of 3 enemies in the middle, before eventually giving up. I'm sure there's a knack to mastering this game, but honestly, I couldn't be arsed. I know I'm in the minority, but I've always hated these Matthew Smith coded games, and I'm not going to waste time trying to change my own mind. They're pure aggravation and not what I wanted from a platform game back then, let alone now. The final game on the compilation is Beachhead, which was originally published by US Gold in 1983. A peaceful island is being held by a ruthless dictator and his military troops. As chief commander of land and sea forces in the Pacific, you must obtain a quick naval victory and then invade the island with land forces. If your troops succeed in penetrating the island defence system, the most difficult challenge still remains, capturing the enemy fortress of Kunlun. Beachhead is a multi-screen action game which requires different skills and provides new sequences as you progress through the game. The game begins on the aerial reconnaissance screen where you must use the joystick to navigate your fleet across the map. There are 2 options for progressing in the game at this point. You can either go through a hidden passage to try and get the jump on the enemy, or engage them directly. If you choose to go through the hidden passage, you must navigate your ships using rotational controls, avoiding all rocks, torpedoes and mines to get from one side of the screen to the other. When a ship has passed through safely, it is displayed in blue on the status bar. You will inevitably end up engaging the enemy fleet, and this takes the form of 2 stages. The first is called General Quarters, and planes will take off from either end of an aircraft carrier on screen and come towards you. When they're close enough, they'll launch bombs at you and then swoop off. You must move your gun turrets left and right, and then use up and down to alter the elevation of your guns, before pressing fire to release a burst of anti-aircraft fire. 10 planes must be shot down to proceed to the next phase if you've gone through the hidden passage, but if you've attacked the fleet head on, then 30 planes must be destroyed. The next level is called Battle Stations and takes place on the same screen, but now you're attacking the enemy ships rather than the planes. Movement and firing of your gun turret is the same as in the previous stage, but now you must use the degree of elevation to estimate the distance that each ship is away from you. After each shot you'll get feedback on how close you were. In the penultimate stage you finally reach the beachhead, landing 2 tanks per boat that survived the previous stage. You must navigate each tank up and down to reach the end of the beach, shooting any enemies and avoiding all obstacles. Each tank that makes it to the end of the beach has the opportunity to attack the fortress of Kunlun. You must land 10 shells on the fortress to destroy it, but only one target is vulnerable at once, flashing white when you're able to hit it. The fortress is defended by a large cannon that will come to bear on your tank, instantly destroying it when it gets a shot. If you manage to get enough tanks to the fortress and land the 10 shots on target, the enemy will surrender and the mission's complete. I reviewed this game as part of the Gold Collection compilation back in November last year, so what you're about to hear is going to sound very familiar, because it's exactly the same review I did then. There's no point reinventing the wheel. This is one of the standout early titles for the C64, and at the time it was released it really put a lot of commercial titles to shame with its range of minigames with different styles of play and objectives, all packed into a single load. Presentation in the game is excellent, with a reasonable title screen, high score table and options for different difficulty levels and an alternating 2-player mode. The graphics are generally great, with loads of variety between stages and smooth movement of all the craft involved. The controls are precise and responsive, especially on the cave and naval battle stages, while the sound effects are quite basic but functional in the context of the game, with gunshots and explosions both simulated well. As I just mentioned, there is a good range of gameplay styles to contend with, such as the maze style of the cave level, accurate shooting in the plane and naval battle stages, and precise movement and blasting in the tank assault section. It then ends with the final attack on the enemy base, which is panic-inducing with the large cannon coming to bear on you, adding to the tension of the game. The game is both engrossing and challenging, though it could get a little repetitive over time once you get to grips with the strategy for each stage. Nonetheless, this is a definite early classic for the system, with loads of gameplay and variety compared to many games released in 1983. So that was the first edition of They Sold a Million. I expect that claim was based on the total number of copies of all 4 games that were sold across multiple platforms, but whatever the basis for the name of the compilation, you can't argue that this is a collection of some very high profile games from that period. It was a pretty eclectic mix too, with a sports sim, a platformer, an arcade adventure and a multi-stage combat game.
Definitely a mixed bag gameplay wise, but what about the quality? I'll round up as I always do by giving each game a score out of 10 and then rating the compilation as a whole. Kicking things off was Daley Thompson's Decathlon, which was a fairly competent clone of the Konami arcade button bashers, with plenty of events to get through. Some of those needed some serious wrist endurance, while others are hard to master, and there are a few niggles around the presentation too, so I'm going to score this 6 out of 10. Next up was the Staff of Karnath. The first of the Arthur Pendragon games sets the tone for the series, and while there is plenty of game to get your teeth into here, the constant backtracking to drop off the pentacle pieces combined with limited energy and tons of respawning enemies does make it quite laborious to play. I'm also going to give this a score of 6. We then moved on to Set Willy. Apparently it's a classic, but I'll never understand why. Infuriating screen designs, naff controls and simplistic graphics add up to a whole load of meh for me, and I'm scoring it 3 out of 10. Rounding out the compilation was Beachhead, and just as it was on the Gold Collection, this is the standout title on this compilation for me, with great presentation, decent graphics and a good range of gameplay challenges across the different stages. Just as I did before, I'm scoring it 8 out of 10. I'll move on now to rating the compilation as a whole, and as always I'll begin with the packaging. I didn't have the instructions for this, but I know exactly what they'd be like, so I'm not marking it down for that. The inlay design looks great, but the lack of information about the 4 games is disappointing, so it's very much relying on you knowing what they were already to encourage you to buy it. For that reason, I'm giving it a packaging score of 6 out of 10. The scores for the 4 games averages out at 5.75, and that just leaves value for money, and while I don't personally think it's an amazing collection, 3 out of the 4 games are perfectly playable, and the opportunity to get 4 high profile games like these for less than £10 in 1985 was rare. A lot more rare than it would be a few years later, so I can recognise the value of it, but then all the same, I'm not giving it a super high value for money score. 7 out of 10 seems about right, and that means that the overall compilation rating for They Sold a Million comes out at 61%. Let's now take a look at what the Gaming Press thought of this compilation. I found one review of the Commodore 64 version in the May 1987 edition of Zap 64 as part of their awkwardly named Crucial Compilations Comparisons Roundup, which I've featured on several other editions of this series. At this point, of course, They Sold a Million have been out for almost 2 years, and that is reflected in some of the review comments. For Beachhead, they say Bruce and Roger Carver's classic multi-stage shoot-'em-up, often imitated but never surpassed. Quite playable, but it looks and feels so dated. I suppose that's fair comment 4 years after it was originally released, but that doesn't mean it's a bad game. For Daley Thompson's Decathlon, it says Ocean's best-selling joystick-waggling sports simulation features 8 events, so Zap getting very confused about what a decathlon is. Considered by some to be good for its time, but unlikely to impress today. I think that's fair comment. For Staff of Karnath, they say Ultimate's first release for the 64 proved something of a disappointment after the quality of their Spectrum product, but it sold well enough. An atmospheric arcade adventure, but the puzzles are annoyingly senseless. To be honest, I didn't really get into the game enough to know whether to agree with that comment or not. And finally, for Set Willy, they say a classic Spectrum platform game that never really hit it off on the 64. Not at all surprising, as it looks awful and plays marginally better. Personally, I'm not sure I'd even agree that it plays marginally better than it looks. They round up by giving the compilation an overall score of 51%, so 10% less than I did, saying They Sold a Million, they may well have done between them, but that was a long time ago and across many different formats. A not so impressive collection of 4 ageing classics, difficult to get hold of but hardly worth the effort. So I think Zap have been slightly more harsh on the compilation than I was, which is a little bit of a surprise. All that remains now then is to see where They Sold a Million has landed on my compilation rankings league table, and I'll keep this brief. It didn't make it onto the full price compilation league table because the qualifying score for the top 12 is now 63% or more. No surprise then that it also didn't make the combined compilation league table that also includes the budget compilations because the qualifying score for that is even higher. Do I think it should have made these league tables based on the quality of the games included? Not really. So that does it for another episode of the Commodore 64 compilation comparison, and firstly I should say thank you to all the subscribers that voted for the compilation. Even though I wasn't particularly impressed with it, it is a very well known compilation from the early days of the Commodore 64, so it was well worth having a look at. If you agree or disagree with my rating of the compilation and the 4 games it contained, or have any personal memories about this compilation, then please let me know in the video comments. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I'll be back with another C64 compilation review in the near future, and plenty of other retro gaming content in the meantime. Thanks very much for watching this video, and until the next time, see ya!